He fired the self-taught coder, then discovered she was the anonymous genius saving his hedge fund. 10 seconds. That's all it took for Grant Mercer to destroy her. He looked at her resume, scanned it, really, eyes moving too fast to actually read, and decided a self-taught girl from Brooklyn wasn't worth the risk. But what he didn't know was that the same woman he fired without a second thought had been the anonymous voice keeping him sane for 3 years. The only person he trusted, the only one who saw him clearly. And when his empire started crumbling, she was the only one who could save it. Before we dive into the story, take a moment and tell us where you're watching from. It helps new viewers find stories like this. The elevator doors opened onto the 42nd floor, and Mara Jennings stepped into a world designed to remind people like her that they didn't belong. She'd worn her only blazer, navy, bought secondhand 3 years ago, pressed 3 times that morning in her Sunset Park studio apartment until the creases were sharp enough to cut. Her laptop bag, covered in duct tape patches hiding tears from 2 subway incidents and 1 coffee spill, hung heavy on her shoulder. Inside, a borrowed charger, a dog-eared copy of Algorithmic Trading Strategies, and the portfolio that had taken her 9 months to build, coding at night after double shifts at the diner. The trading floor stretched out like a cathedral of money. Screens everywhere, glowing with numbers that represented someone's retirement, someone's dream, someone's panic. Young men in shirts that cost more than her monthly rent moved between desks with the casual confidence of people who'd never doubted they belonged. The hum wasn't just air conditioning. It was hundreds of millions of dollars moving through fiber optic cables, flowing through algorithms, reshaping lives with every microsecond of latency. Mara's hands were sweating. She wiped them on her slacks, also secondhand, also pressed until the fabric shined, and told herself to breathe. You earned this. Your code is clean. Your thinking is solid. They called you. They wanted you. You the new junior dev? A woman with a sleek ponytail looked her up and down, taking in the blazer that was slightly too big in the shoulders, the shoes that were practical instead of stylish, the laptop bag that screamed poverty louder than any resume ever could. I'm Claire. You'll shadow me today. Mara had spent 72 hours memorizing the fund's architecture, preparing questions that would prove she understood risk at a level most Ivy League graduates never touched. She'd reverse-engineered their public filings, studied their trading patterns, learned the names of every senior analyst. The code didn't care where you went to school. The code just had to work. But the people cared. She felt it in the first hour. The glances that lingered a beat too long, curious and dismissive in equal measure. The pauses when she introduced herself. That fractional hesitation before someone decided whether she was worth remembering. The way a senior analyst asked, "Where'd you go to school?" Not with genuine interest, but as a sorting mechanism, a quick way to place her in the hierarchy. And when she said, "I'm self-taught, but I have experience with," he'd already turned away, bored, before she could finish the sentence. Each small dismissal was a paper cut. Alone, manageable. Together, they bled. At 11, Claire brought her into a meeting room where 3 men sat around a table covered in algorithmic trading patterns, beautiful, chaotic visualizations of money in motion. One of them was Grant Mercer. Mara had seen his photo on the company website, read the press profiles calling him a genius, a visionary, the future of quantitative trading. In person, he looked different. Exhausted, shadows carved beneath his eyes like bruises, a tightness around his jaw that spoke of too many sleepless nights and too much coffee consumed standing up. His suit was perfect, but he wore it like armor, not comfort. He didn't look up when she entered. "This is Mara Jennings," Claire said, her voice carefully neutral. "New junior developer." Grant glanced at a sheet of paper, her resume, the one she'd rewritten 17 times, trying to make 3 years of self-directed learning sound legitimate. His eyes moved fast. Too fast. He wasn't reading. He was scanning for credentials, for the one thing that would tell him whether she mattered. Stanford, MIT, Wharton. The names that opened doors. Her name wasn't any of those things. Where'd you study? The question landed like a fist. Mara had practiced this answer, rehearsed it until the words felt natural, but under his gaze, impatient, already half dismissive, the script dissolved. I'm self-taught, Mr. Thorne. I have a portfolio that demonstrates self-taught. He set the paper down, not gently, and the sound of it hitting the table felt final. Claire, did HR approve this? Claire shifted her weight. Mara saw the calculation in her eyes. Defend this stranger and risk Grant's irritation, or stay silent and stay safe. Her portfolio was strong. She came through the open application process. We're managing $8 billion. Grant's voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Our systems process 100,000 trades per second. One mistake, one bug, one oversight costs us millions. Real money. Real people's retirements. He looked at Mara for the first time, really looked. And what she saw wasn't cruelty. It was something worse. Indifference. She was a risk he didn't need to take. A variable he could eliminate with a word. I'm sure you're smart. I'm sure you worked hard, but this isn't a place where we gamble on people who taught themselves from online tutorials. The room went silent. Somewhere, a Bloomberg terminal chimed. Outside the glass walls, traders moved with purpose, unaware that Mara's entire future was collapsing in real time. She wanted to say, I didn't learn from tutorials. I learned from textbooks I read standing in bookstores because I couldn't afford to buy them, memorizing pages during my lunch breaks, taking photos with a cracked phone when the security guard wasn't watching. I learned by reverse engineering your algorithms at 2 a.m. after my diner shift, when exhaustion made the code blur, but I kept going because stopping meant accepting I'd always be invisible. I learned because no one was going to hand me anything, and I'm better than half the people on this floor who had everything handed to them. But her throat had closed. The words were there, true and sharp, but they couldn't get past the shame, the burning certainty that he was right and she was a fool for ever believing she belonged here. Claire, work with HR on a severance package. Grant stood, already reaching for his phone, his attention sliding away like she'd never existed. This isn't personal. He walked past Mara without a second glance. She stood there in her second-hand blazer, 42 floors above the city where she'd grown up dreaming of moments exactly like this, and felt herself disappear. Not die. Just cease to matter. Security escorted her out 20 minutes later. A young guy, apologetic, making small talk about the weather as he walked her to the elevators like she was a package being returned to sender. As she waited, clutching her duct-taped laptop bag, one of the young traders walked past with his friend. Their voices carried. That the girl Grant fired? Yeah, self-taught, can you imagine? They laughed. Not cruel laughter exactly. Just the casual dismissal of people who'd never had to imagine being her. People for whom doors opened automatically, who never had to wonder if they belonged because the world had been telling them they did since birth. The elevator doors closed. Mara watched the numbers descend, each one a floor falling away. 42, 41, 40. Each one felt like confirmation. You were right to doubt yourself. You don't belong here. You never will. On the subway home, the F train packed with afternoon bodies, the smell of humanity pressed together, She stared at her reflection in the dark window and made herself a promise. One day, he's going to need me, and I'm going to make him say it out loud, make him see what he threw away, make him know in his bones that he was wrong. That night at 11:47, Mara opened her laptop in her studio apartment. The place smelled like the Thai restaurant downstairs, fish sauce and lemongrass, the same smell that clung to her clothes and hair no matter how many times she washed them. She logged into the trading forum she'd been visiting for 3 years, the anonymous space where nobody knew her face or her lack of credentials. Username, Ghost in the Machine. One message stood out from a username she knew well. Burned out 42. BO42? You still awake? Ghost in the Machine. Always. BO42. Had to let someone go today. Wrong reasons. Can't stop thinking about it. Ghost in the Machine. Wrong reasons, how? BO42. She didn't have the credentials, but her work was actually brilliant. I didn't even look. I've become exactly what I used to hate. Mara stared at the screen, her chest tight with something between rage and bitter satisfaction. The irony cut like glass. Sharp, clean, deep. She didn't know who Burned Out 42 was in real life. They'd met 3 years ago when she'd posted about hedging volatility in illiquid markets, expecting to be ignored or dismissed. Instead, he'd answered with a sophistication that proved he wasn't some retail trader playing with his savings. He worked at a major fund, had real capital, real pressure, real expertise. Over time, their conversations had deepened beyond technical analysis. Risk, markets, the philosophy of uncertainty, but also loneliness. The feeling of being trapped in a machine you built yourself. The weight of decisions made for money instead of meaning. He'd told her once, late on a Thursday night, I used to love this. Markets felt like puzzles, like art. Now I'm just running on fumes, making decisions I don't believe in, trying to satisfy people who don't even like me. She'd told him, then stop. Build something that matters. Build something true. I don't remember how, he'd written back. I don't remember what that feels like. Now Mara typed, her fingers trembling slightly. You haven't become that person permanently. You just have to catch yourself. See yourself clearly. BO42. How? Ghost in the Machine. Apologize to her. BO42. I can't. She's gone. I don't even know where. Ghost in the Machine. Then make sure the next person gets a fair shot. Make it mean something. She closed the laptop and stared at the water-stained ceiling. The next person. As if she'd ever step foot in a Manhattan hedge fund again. As if she'd ever put herself in a position to be dismissed like that. To feel so small. But she'd made a promise on that subway. And Mara didn't break promises. 2 weeks later, a recruiter called. Mason and Partners, a small fund in a converted warehouse across the river in Long Island City. They'd seen her portfolio, the real one she'd posted anonymously on GitHub under her username, the one that showed what she could actually do. The interview was different. The office smelled like coffee and old books instead of money and ambition. The people actually read her code, spent an hour going through her risk models line by line, asked technical questions that proved they understood what they were looking at. They challenged her assumptions, pushed back on her logic, treated her like someone who knew things worth knowing. We're building a risk monitoring system, David Mason told her. Gray beard, wrinkled shirt, wire rim glasses that caught the light. Former math professor who'd quit academia because he realized the markets were lying to themselves about risk. The big funds think they're immune to black swans because they have fancy models and fancy pedigrees. They're wrong. They're flying blind and they don't even know it. We want to see the cracks before they break open. What's the catch? David smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. We can't pay you what the big funds pay, and we need it fast. 3 months. I'll do it in 2. She started Monday. Grant Mercer sat in his corner office at 9 on a Friday night, staring at a Bloomberg terminal showing the slow collapse of everything he'd built. The fund was down 11% over 6 months. Their flagship strategy, the one that was supposed to be bulletproof, the one his father had grudgingly admitted was not embarrassing, had been bleeding consistently. The investment committee was losing confidence. Investors were asking questions. His father had called that afternoon to suggest, in his calm, surgical way that made every word a scalpel, that perhaps Grant wasn't cut out for the pressure after all. Perhaps the Thorne legacy was better served by someone with more fortitude. His father had always been good at that, the subtle cut, the implication that Grant's success was borrowed, not earned, that he was living off the family name instead of building his own. Grant opened his laptop and navigated to the forum. Anonymous. Safe. The one place where no one knew his name or his pedigree or his father's shadow. Burned out 42. I think I'm losing it. 3 minutes later. Ghost in the machine. Talk to me. BO 42. My fund is bleeding. 6 months of losses. I have 20 analysts and none of them can tell me where the risk is hiding. I'm flying blind and I don't know how to land. Ghost in the machine. What's your VAR model based on? Grant explained the technical details, the assumptions underlying their value-at-risk calculations, the correlations they were tracking, the historical patterns they were using to predict future volatility. 20 minutes later, after he'd laid out everything, Ghost in the machine. Your model assumes pre-2020 volatility patterns. Central bank policy broke those patterns permanently. You're using correlation matrices built on a world that doesn't exist anymore. That's your blind spot. Grant stared at the message, feeling something crack open in his chest. She was right. He'd been so deep in the weeds, so exhausted, so focused on putting out fires that he'd missed something fundamental. The foundation was broken. BO 42. How do I fix it? Ghost in the machine. You need real-time correlation tracking across non-traditional data, satellite imagery, supply chain patterns, social media sentiment, energy consumption, corporate flight data. You need to stress test against scenarios your model calls impossible, because impossible happens now. BO 42. That's a 6-month project minimum. Ghost in the machine. Then start now. Or keep bleeding. A pause. Grant stared at the cursor blinking in the darkness of his office. BO 42. Why do you help me? The cursor blinked for almost a minute. Ghost in the machine. Because you're not an asshole. You're just lost. I know what that feels like. And because everyone deserves someone who sees them clearly. Grant closed the laptop and looked out at Manhattan's glittering grid, all those lit windows representing people working late, grinding, surviving, building. He thought about the woman he'd fired. What was her name? Mara Jennings. He'd barely looked at her, barely given her a chance. 10 seconds to decide her entire worth. I've become what I used to hate. He'd said it to Ghost in the machine, and it was true. He just didn't know how to stop. Didn't know how to be different when being different felt like weakness, felt like failure, felt like letting his father win. Mara worked 90-hour weeks. The system she was building wasn't just code. It was a new way of seeing reality. Traditional models assumed the future would rhyme with the past, that patterns would repeat, that yesterday's correlations would hold tomorrow. Her system rejected that comfortable lie. Instead, it monitored thousands of unconventional data points in real time. Satellite images of shipping traffic, social media sentiment analysis, corporate flight patterns that revealed executive panic, energy consumption shifts that signaled manufacturing changes. It looked for divergences, places where the world was changing in ways old models couldn't see. That night, she still talked to burned-out 42. Their conversations went deeper than markets and risk. He told her about his father's expectations, the crushing weight of a legacy he never asked for, the loneliness of success that felt hollow. She told him, carefully, never revealing too much, about growing up poor, about being invisible, about the strange violence of being dismissed without ever being seen. BO 42. Do you ever feel like you're pretending to be someone you're not? Ghost in the machine. Every single day. But pretending long enough is the same as becoming. It has to be. BO 42. Is it? Ghost in the machine. It has to be. Otherwise, people like me stay exactly where we started. Otherwise, nothing ever changes. One night, he wrote something that made her pause. BO 42. I had this moment today. Walked past our IT department and saw this kid, maybe 22, working late on a Friday night. Reminded me of myself at that age. Except I had everything handed to me and didn't even know it. He's probably working twice as hard for half the recognition. And when he asks for a promotion, someone like me will spend 10 seconds on his resume and decide he's not worth the risk. And I realized, I'm the obstacle now. I'm the guy who makes it harder for people like him. People like you. Ghost in the machine. So change it. BO 42. What if it's too late? What if I've built something so broken I can't fix it? What if trying just means losing everything? She thought about the glass room, the security escort, the laughter by the elevators, the scar tissue those 10 seconds had left behind. Ghost in the machine. It's not too late, but you have to actually do the work, not just feel bad about it. Feeling bad is easy. Changing is hard. BO 42. You're right. You're always right. Ghost in the machine. I'm not always right. I'm just honest. And honesty is free. BO 42. That's rarer than you think. She didn't tell him she'd been fired from his fund. Some wounds you kept to yourself. Some ironies were too sharp to share. 6 months after Mara started at Mason & Partners, her system went live. The first week, it flagged a correlation breakdown in European bonds that every major fund had missed. Their models said everything was fine, but her unconventional data sources showed cracks forming. Mason & Partners made $7 million. The second week, it predicted a flash crash in semiconductors 40 minutes before it happened, enough time to hedge. 12 million more. Word spread quietly through the quant world, the way it always did. Whispers, back channels, people who knew people. Hedge fund managers started calling David Mason. Who built this? Where did you find her? Can we license it? David always said the same thing. She's not for sale. And across the river, in a glass tower in Midtown, Grant Mercer's fund continued to bleed. It was a Thursday in February when Grant's head of risk walked into his office looking pale. We have a problem. Big one. Grant listened as his analyst explained. Massive Latin America exposure through a leveraged derivative position they'd built 3 months ago. Peso volatility was spiking. If it moved the wrong way, cascading losses could trigger margin calls that would destroy them. Our model says 2% probability of catastrophic movement, minimal risk. And if the model's wrong? Silence. The analyst had no answer. Grant opened his laptop, navigated to the forum with shaking hands. BO42. I need a second opinion on currency risk. Fast. Life or death. Can you consult? No response. 10 minutes. 20. An hour. Grant paced his office, watching peso futures tick upward, feeling the trap close around him. Finally, ghost in the machine. What's the question? Grant explained everything. The exposure, the model's assumptions, the risk assessment showing they were safe. Ghost in the machine. Your model is wrong. The peso is going to move. Big. You have maybe 24 hours before it breaks. BO42. How do you know? Ghost in the machine. Because I'm looking at 17 data points your model doesn't track. Energy imports, flight patterns, social media sentiment in Sao Paulo and Mexico City, corporate cash movements. The central bank is about to intervene and they're going to get it wrong. Get out now. BO42. I need to see your model. I need proof. Ghost in the machine. You can't afford it. BO42. Name your price. Anything. A long pause. Grant watched the cursor blink, his heart hammering. Ghost in the machine. There is no price. You fired me. Remember? Grant stared at the screen. The words didn't make sense. They rearranged themselves in his vision but refused to form meaning. BO42. What? Ghost in the machine. 6 months ago. 42nd floor. Navy blazer. Duct-taped laptop bag. You looked at my resume for 10 seconds and decided I wasn't worth your time. Self-taught coder who learned from YouTube tutorials, right? That's what you told Claire. That's what you told yourself. You didn't even remember my name until just now. The air left his lungs. The office tilted. Grant gripped the edge of his desk. BO42. Mara. Ghost in the machine. Congratulations. You finally learned my name. His hands shook. 3 years of conversations. 3 years of late-night confessions and technical debates and philosophical arguments about markets and meaning. 3 years of her keeping him sane, keeping him thinking, keeping him human. It had been her the entire time. The woman he'd dismissed without a second thought. The person he trusted most in the world was someone he'd thrown away like garbage. BO42. I'm sorry. Ghost in the machine. I'm sure you are. Good luck with the peso. She went offline. Grant sat there, 42 floors above the city, feeling his own arrogance crash down on him like a building collapsing floor by floor. He'd spent his career being smarter than everyone else, trusting his judgment above all, protecting himself from risk. And he'd been blind to the most obvious truth. Talent didn't wear the right suit or carry the right degree. The person he'd trusted most in the world was someone he'd thrown away without looking. He called his trading desk, his voice raw. Liquidate Latin America. All of it. Every position. Now. But the model says, I don't care what the model says. Do it. They executed over 6 hours, unwinding tens of millions in positions. The peso moved the next day, 6% in 4 hours, exactly as Mara had predicted. It would have destroyed them, wiped out 18 months of returns, possibly triggered a complete collapse. Instead, they were safe. But Grant didn't feel relief. He felt hollowed out. He felt like a man who'd been walking around half-blind his entire life and only now realized what he'd been missing. He tried to reach her through the forum. No response. He tried HR records. The address was invalid. The phone number disconnected. He called Mason and Partners. The receptionist listened politely and declined to help. 3 days later, his father called. "I heard about the LATAM position. Bold move. Who gave you the tip?" Grant hesitated. "Someone I used to know." "Keep them close. People who can see around corners are rare. People who will tell you the truth are rarer." I had her, Grant thought, staring at his reflection in the dark window. I had her in my office and I threw her out in 10 seconds because she didn't go to the right school. He opened a document and started typing. Not a memo, not a strategy. A letter. "Dear Mara, I know you have no reason to read this. I know an apology on paper is worthless compared to what I did. But I need to say it anyway. I was wrong. Not just about you. About everything. I built my identity on being the smartest person in the room, and it made me stop seeing people, stop listening, stop being human. You saved my fund, saved my career. But more than that, for 3 years you were the only person who talked to me like I was human. Not a thorn, not a CEO, not a legacy. Just someone trying to figure things out. You didn't know who I was, and that's why you could see me clearly. I can't undo what I did, can't give you back the humiliation, can't make those 10 seconds disappear. But I want you to know you were right about everything. The markets, risk, the person I was becoming. I'm trying to be different now. I don't know if I'll succeed. Probably I'll fail. But you should know you mattered. You still do. If you ever want to talk, not about trading, just talk. My number is below. Grant. He sent it to her old email. It bounced back. Address not found. Mara read the letter 3 weeks later through a forwarding system she'd set up, a friend at the company who still had access. She read it twice. Then a third time. The words sounded genuine. But words were easy. Words cost nothing. The question was, what would he do when it cost him something? When change meant risk, meant loss, meant admitting he'd been wrong not just once, but systemically. She didn't respond. Instead, she went back to work. Her system was getting stronger, and Mara was getting offers. Big ones. Funds that had ignored her a year ago were suddenly very interested. Headhunters called with numbers that made her dizzy. One offer came from a fund bidding against Grant's firm for a $2 billion pension account. New York State Pension Fund. The decision would come down to risk management capabilities. Mara knew exactly how that would end. Grant stood in the New York State Pension Fund's boardroom 2 months later, giving the presentation of his career. 3 months of preparation, charts, projections, historical performance, everything polished to perfection. His team had built a 200-slide deck they'd rehearsed for weeks. Patricia Chen, the pension fund's CIO, listened politely, asked smart questions that cut through the polish to the substance beneath, gave nothing away. At the end, "We're also meeting with Mason and Partners tomorrow. We'll make our decision by end of week." Grant kept his face neutral, but inside, he felt everything shift. Mason and Partners. The fund that had hired Mara. The system that had saved him was about to cost him everything. He left at 5, something he never did, and took the subway across the river to Long Island City, found the converted warehouse and stood outside for 15 minutes, gathering courage he didn't know he still had. Finally, he walked in. The receptionist looked surprised. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I'm here to see Mara Jennings." The receptionist made a call. A long conversation, hushed and concerned. "I'll take you back." The office was nothing like his. No glass walls, no expensive art, no designer furniture signaling wealth and power. Just desks and whiteboards covered in equations and people who looked like they actually enjoyed their work. Like work was something other than warfare. Mara sat at a corner desk, 3 monitors glowing, fingers flying across a keyboard. She wore jeans and a faded NYU sweatshirt. No performance, no polish. Just her. She looked up. Her expression didn't change, didn't soften, didn't harden, just steady. "You have 5 minutes, Grant said. "I read your system. What you're presenting to Patricia Chen, it's extraordinary. It's everything I tried to build and failed." "You didn't come here to compliment my work?" "No, I came to apologize, in person. The letter wasn't enough. Words aren't enough, but I needed to say it to your face." "You're right, it wasn't enough." "Tell me what would be enough." Mara leaned back in her chair, studying him with those eyes that missed nothing. "Nothing. There is no enough. You can't give me back the 6 months I spent wondering if everyone was right and I didn't belong. Can't undo the humiliation of being escorted out by security. Can't erase the laughter by the elevators. So I don't know what you want me to say." "I don't want you to say anything. I want you to know I've been thinking about what you said, about pretending until you become. I've been pretending my whole life, pretending I deserved everything because of my last name, pretending I wasn't drowning, pretending I was my father. And now? Now I'm trying to stop. I fired 3 senior analysts last month, not because they were bad at their jobs, because they treated junior staff like servants. Changed our hiring policy completely. We're recruiting from community colleges now, coding boot camps, state schools, anywhere people show real talent instead of inherited privilege." "That's great, Grant, really. But it doesn't change what you did to me." "I know." He met her eyes. "But I wanted you to know you changed me. And I'm grateful. Even if you never forgive me, even if you destroy me with that pension account." Mara was quiet for a long moment. Afternoon light slanted through the warehouse windows, catching dust motes, making everything look softer than it was. "Patricia Chen is going to choose us," she said finally. "My system is better. My team is better. You're going to lose that account, and it's going to hurt." "I know." "And you came anyway." "I came to apologize, not to change your mind, not to negotiate, just to say I was wrong and you were right. And I'm sorry." Mara studied him, looking for the lie, looking for the angle, looking for the manipulation she'd learned to expect from men in expensive suits. But all she saw was someone genuinely tired and genuinely sorry and genuinely trying. "Okay." "Okay." "I heard your apology. I don't forgive you yet. Maybe I never will. But I heard it." Grant nodded slowly. "That's more than I deserve." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. Ghost in the Machine was the smartest person I ever talked to. I wish I'd known it was you sooner. "If you'd known, you would have stopped listening." "Yeah," Grant said quietly, the admission heavy in his throat. "I probably would have." After he left, Mara stared at her screens without seeing them. She felt something unexpected, not satisfaction, not vindication, something softer, something dangerous, something like the possibility of beginning again. Patricia Chen chose Mason and Partners. The news hit the press 3 days later. Upstart firm wins $2 billion pension mandate. Thorn Capital loses key account. Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Financial Times. The articles dissected Grant's firm with surgical precision, noting declining returns, questionable risk management, loss of competitive edge. His father called with disappointment so heavy it felt like a physical weight through the phone line. The board scheduled an emergency meeting. Senior analysts updated their LinkedIn profiles. But Grant didn't panic. Instead, he called an all-hands meeting. Every analyst, trader, developer, administrative assistant. He stood in front of them at 9 in the morning and told the truth. 6 months ago, I fired someone on her first day because she didn't have the right degree. I looked at her resume for 10 seconds and decided she wasn't worth my time. Didn't read her code, didn't ask questions, didn't see her. 2 weeks ago, that person's work cost us a $2 billion account. Not because she was vindictive, because she was better. Because while I was hiring people who looked like me and sounded like me and went to school with me, she was building something that actually worked. He talked about assumptions, about privilege, about how easy it was to confuse credentials with competence, pedigree with performance. I'm changing how we operate, starting today. We judge people by what they can do, not where they learned it. We build systems that work, not systems that look impressive. And if some of you can't adapt to that, if you need to feel superior to people who don't have your background, you'll leave. But I'm not running this fund the way my father ran it anymore. I'm done with that. The room was silent. Then a junior analyst, a woman from a state school in Ohio who'd been overlooked for promotions for 3 years, started clapping. Slowly, others joined. Some of the older analysts walked out. Grant let them go. Mara heard about the meeting through back channels. The quant world was small, incestuous, gossip traveling faster than market data. She also heard Grant had called her, left 3 voicemails asking if she'd speak to his team about her work. Not to join the fund, not to negotiate, just to teach. She thought about saying no. Then she remembered her grandmother, the woman who'd raised her after her mother died. When you learn something hard, you owe it to the next person to pass it on. That's how we survive. She called him back. I'll speak to your team. Once, but not at your office. Where? My old community college, Bronx Community College, where I learned probability theory from a textbook I couldn't afford to buy. If your people want to hear what I have to say, they come to me. He agreed without hesitation. 3 weeks later, Grant walked into a classroom at Bronx Community College with 12 senior analysts. The room smelled like old textbooks and floor wax, and decades of students struggling toward better futures. Scratched desks covered in graffiti, initials, dates, small declarations of existence. Stained whiteboard, flickering fluorescent lights. Mara stood at the front in jeans and a black sweater. No performance, no polish, no slides. Just her and a whiteboard and the truth. For 2 hours, she walked them through her system. The logic, the mathematics, the unconventional data sources, the philosophy underlying it. The world is always changing, and your job is to see the change before the change sees you. She didn't simplify, didn't talk down. She treated them like peers who'd shown up to learn, and they responded by actually listening. At the end, a Princeton analyst raised his hand. Young guy, confident, used to being the smartest person in any room. How did you figure this out without formal training? Mara smiled. Not friendly, not hostile, just honest. I had formal training, just not the kind you're used to. I learned from people who didn't care about my background. I learned by failing 1,000 times where nobody was watching, where mistakes were private. And I learned because I had to. When you grow up knowing one mistake means you don't eat that week, you get very good at not making mistakes. When you know nobody's going to give you a second chance, you make damn sure you earn the first one. After the session, Grant waited while the others filtered out, asking final questions, shaking Mara's hand with something that looked like respect. Mara packed her laptop slowly, deliberately. Thank you. For what? For showing them what I should have seen 6 months ago. Mara zipped her bag, the sound loud in the empty classroom. You know what the hardest part was? It wasn't the humiliation. It wasn't being escorted out by security or hearing them laugh. It was knowing you trusted me completely when you didn't know who I was. The second you saw my face, heard my background, I became worthless. That's what I can't forget. That's the thing that still cuts. I know, and I don't know how to fix that. I don't think I can. But I'm trying to build something different. Good. She turned to leave, then paused at the door, silhouetted against the hallway light. Grant? Yeah? When you said you felt like you were flying blind, you weren't. You had me. You just couldn't see it. I see it now. Do you? Or do you just see what you lost? She left before he could answer, her footsteps echoing down the empty corridor. Over the following months, they developed something that wasn't quite friendship, but wasn't purely professional either. He'd send technical questions. She'd answer, sometimes. They'd debate theory, argue about models, challenge each other's assumptions. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give. Slowly, carefully, she started to trust that the change was real, that he was doing the work. 9 months after their first meeting at Mason and Partners, David Mason called her into his office. He looked tired, happy, conflicted. Grant Mercer wants to buy us out. Well, merge. New entity, equal partnership between firms. And he wants you to run it. What? He said, and I'm quoting directly here, the smartest person in risk management shouldn't be working out of a warehouse. She should be building the system everyone else follows. And I can't build that without her. That's insane. It's also a $50 million offer. Equal equity split between you, me, and him. And he's not asking you to join his fund. He's asking to join yours. To build something new together. Mara sat down hard. What do you want? I want you to do what's right for you. You've already made me plenty of money. You don't owe me anything. This is about what you want to build. Mara met Grant at a Brooklyn coffee shop 2 days later. Neutral ground. Small place in Park Slope, vinyl booths, coffee that tasted like actual coffee instead of status. He showed up in jeans and a t-shirt, the most casual she'd ever seen him, like he was trying to shed the costume. Before you say no, I'm not saying no. He blinked, genuinely surprised. You're not? I need to know this is real. That you won't revert the second things get hard or your father calls or the board pushes back. It's real. Prove it. Grant pulled out a folder, not a pitch book, a detailed proposal, not just for the merger, but for a new kind of fund, one that recruited from community colleges, coding boot camps, self-taught developers, one where Mara would have full autonomy over hiring, structure, culture, where talent mattered more than pedigree. There's one more thing. He pulled out a second document, slid it across the table. I'm stepping down as CEO. What? I'm staying as a partner, head of strategy, but the fund needs someone who can actually see people, who understands what it means to build from nothing. That's not me. That's you. Mara stared at the document, her name at the top. CEO, co-founder, equal equity split with Grant and David. Why? Because I spent 3 years talking to you and you made me better. A better thinker, a better trader, a better person. And I was too blind to see it when you were right in front of me. I don't want to be blind anymore. I want to build something that works, and I can't do that without you. Mara was quiet for a long time, staring at the document without reading it. She thought about the girl in the navy blazer being escorted out by security. The promise she'd made on that subway. One day, he's going to need me. Say it, she said. What? Say what you should have said 9 months ago. What you should have seen in 10 seconds. Grant met her eyes. No performance, no script, just truth. I need you. Not because you can save my fund, not because your system is better. Because you see things I can't. Because you're willing to tell me when I'm wrong. Because you earned everything you have. And that makes you worth more than everyone who inherited their seat at the table. Including me. Especially me. Mara felt something crack open in her chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. Something more complicated. The possibility of beginning again, of building something real. Okay. Okay. Let's build something. The announcement hit 6 weeks later. Thorn Capital merges with Mason Risk Partners. Mara Reyes named CEO of new entity. Wall Street Journal above the fold. Bloomberg lead story. Financial Times analysis. Photos of Mara in their new downtown Manhattan office. Glass and steel, but with whiteboards covered in equations and desks arranged in clusters instead of hierarchies. A trading floor that felt like collaboration instead of competition. Some called it bold. Others called it a publicity stunt. Grant's father resigned from the board in protest, called it the end of the Thorn legacy. Grant let him go. On the first day, Grant and Mara stood together on the trading floor at 6 a.m, an hour before anyone else arrived. Screens glowing, systems humming. 75 employees from both firms, plus 15 new hires from community colleges and boot camps across the country. Detroit, Oakland, the Bronx, rural Georgia. Nervous? Grant asked. Terrified. Good. Me too. At 9:30, the markets opened, and for the first time in years, Grant felt like he was exactly where he belonged. 2 years later, the fund managed $15 billion with the best risk-adjusted returns in the industry. They'd survived 2 major market corrections that destroyed funds 3 times their size. Mara's system had predicted both, giving them time to hedge, time to protect their investors. But the real story wasn't the money. It was the culture they'd built. The fund had become known as the place where talent mattered more than pedigree, where a single mom from Queens could sit next to a Wharton MBA and be judged only by the quality of her ideas, where someone's first chance was real, not performative, where the code mattered more than the credentials. They'd hired a formerly incarcerated developer who'd learned to code in prison, a refugee from Syria who'd taught himself English and Python simultaneously, a transgender woman who'd been fired from 3 firms for not fitting the culture, a teenage prodigy who'd dropped out of high school to build trading algorithms. And they were all brilliant. Grant still talked to Mara late at night after everyone else had gone home. In person now, not online. They'd sit in the conference room drinking coffee, arguing about risk theory and philosophy and whether anything in the market was truly random or if it was all just patterns they hadn't learned to see yet. One night, Mara said, "You know what's funny? I still think of myself as Ghost in the Machine sometimes. Like that's who I really am. This," she gestured at the office, the screens, the empire they'd built together, "feels like pretending." "You told me once that pretending long enough is the same as becoming." "I know. But do you ever stop feeling like an imposter? Do you ever feel like you deserve it?" Grant thought about it. Really thought. "I don't think so. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the people who feel like imposters are the ones who keep earning it, the ones who stay hungry, the ones who remember." Maybe. They sat in comfortable silence, watching markets move across the screens, millions of dollars flowing through systems they'd built together, through code Mara had written, through trust they'd earned the hard way. "I forgive you," Mara said suddenly. Grant looked at her, genuinely surprised. "I should have said it sooner, but I forgive you. For what you did, for who you were." "Why now?" "Because you proved it was real. The change. You didn't just apologize, you rebuilt everything. Changed the hiring, changed the culture, gave up control. And that's more than most people ever do. That's real." Grant felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he'd been carrying for 2 years. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just don't forget how you got here. Don't forget who you were and why you had to change." "I won't." Outside, the city glowed. Somewhere in the Bronx, a teenager was probably fixing a broken laptop, teaching themselves to code from free tutorials, dreaming of a world that didn't see them yet. Somewhere in Manhattan, a hiring manager was probably throwing out a resume without reading it, deciding in 10 seconds that someone wasn't worth their time. But here, in this office, on this floor, they'd built something different. A place where talent could be seen, where second chances weren't just possible, but expected, where the kid from nowhere could walk through the front door and be judged by what they could do, not where they came from. It wasn't perfect. People still made mistakes, bias still crept in. The work was never finished, but it was real. And that was the only thing that mattered.